These days, we take for granted that federal tax money is used in the building and maintaining of our road system. But obviously that precedent had to begin somewhere, and that was with the national road. Long before the advent of motor vehicles, the national road became America's first federally funded highway. Also widely known as the Cumberland Road and the National Pike, it received authorization from Congress, and President Thomas Jefferson signed the bill into law back in 1806. Construction began in 1811, and the intent was to provide a travel corridor through the Appalachian Mountains from the east coast of the country to the then western frontier, and eventually to reach the Mississippi River at St. Louis, Missouri. At the time, most long-distance transportation of people or goods was via waterway, but no navigable rivers linked the population centers of the East Coast to the newly settled western lands. The National Road was envisioned as a solution to that problem, expanding commerce and settlement in the West by improving the speed and safety of travel. The new road began in Cumberland, Maryland, at the headwaters of the Potomac River, and in 1818 was completed to Wheeling, in what is now West Virginia. This leg allowed overland connection between the Potomac River system and the Ohio River system. In 1838, the road made it to Springfield, Ohio, and in 1841, it was opened to what was then the Illinois capital city, Vandalia. By then, though, railroads were making great progress at easing transportation difficulties, and the official National Road project never made its final link to St. Louis. It did, however, stretch through portions of 6 states on its journey from Maryland to Illinois, and helped open the western portions of our young country. It became the main street of many communities that it passed through, and earned the moniker of Main Street of America long before Route 66 came to be and took that title away. Much of the path of the National Road followed existing trails and lesser roads, but very detailed specifications and construction methods were outlined for the new highway, in an effort to make it as modern and long-lasting as possible for its time. Adherence to the standards varied according to the location, and while some regions were far below the ideal, other portions improved upon the original construction plan with the ideas of John Macadam and his precise layered stone surfacing. While much of the route today is like any other modern secondary highway, centuries-old buildings dot various points along the route, as do gently curving S-shaped stone bridges dating back to the first days of the National Road. Many structures, and in fact some whole towns along the route, are listed in the National Register of Historic Places. The road snakes through large cities, small towns, suburban sprawl, and rural areas of woods, mountains, and farmlands. Most of the road today is part of U.S. Highway 40, although in a number of areas, modern Highway 40 bypasses portions of the original Pike. Careful attention to signs will help you follow much of the original path of the historic route, including some quiet, narrow, scenic cobblestone byways. Roadside plaques, as well as various museums, provide information about some of the points of historic interest along the highway. In Cumberland, Maryland, the starting point of the National Road is on the banks of the north branch of the Potomac River, along with historic buildings used by George Washington in early military conflicts. In the mid and late 1800s, Cumberland further bolstered its credentials as an important transportation hub with the coming of the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal and the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. This history is celebrated today at Canal Place, adjacent to the road's start. Marking the western terminus of the C&O Canal, exhibits here showcase the glory days of the National Road, the canal, and the railroad. You'll also find scenic train tours, canal boat rides, and other recreational and historic activities centered around Canal Place. From the city, the National Road headed west through the Cumberland Narrows, the easiest passage across the Allegheny Mountains, while all along the way, stone markers noted the distance to Wheeling. The Castleman River Bridge, opened in 1813, was once the largest stone arch bridge in the country. Its 80-foot span carried traffic for nearly 120 years before being shut down in favor of newer river crossings. Moving westward and a bit northward, the National Road crosses into Pennsylvania and through sites important to the struggle for America's independence in the 1700s. The route passes Fort Necessity and battlefields dating back to the opening of the French and Indian War. Here, a young George Washington commanded British colonial troops as they fought France for control of this portion of North America. Washington was defeated and retreated to Cumberland, Maryland. British Major General Edward Braddock was then called upon to lead a new attack, only to be mortally wounded in another battle near Fort Necessity on July 13, 1755. He was buried under what was to later become the National Road in order to protect his remains from desecration. In 1804, crews repairing the route found his original gravesite. His remains were then reinterred at this site adjacent to the road, which has been marked by a monument since 1913. All along the National Road, taverns served travelers with sleeping quarters and hot food in past centuries. One of the many tavern buildings that still remain intact is the Mount Washington Tavern, dating back to around 1828. Now a museum, it stands at the roadside near Fort Necessity. Continuing westward in Pennsylvania, cities and towns with colonial as well as industrial era histories abound. Uniontown, the birthplace of General George Marshall, the author of the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe after World War II, Brownsville, the home of the 22-room Nemacolin Castle, a reminder of the wealthy styles of the Victorian era, Bealsville, with an abundance of well-preserved 19th century buildings, and Washington, with history important to the early days of our country, as well as an important stop on the Underground Railroad, are but a few of the fascinating places you'll pass through. Although the National Road construction was federally funded, the individual states were responsible for its upkeep, and a number of toll houses were built along its length. Some fine examples of them still stand sentinel in Pennsylvania and other states along the road. Approximately 16 miles of the National Road between Pennsylvania and Ohio runs through West Virginia. As mentioned, Wheeling was the western terminus of the first completed portion of the road. It was part of Virginia at that time, as West Virginia didn't break away and become a separate state until 1863. Today, Wheeling is a hub of commercial, industrial, and recreational activities, and you'll find the busy river city filled with historic structures, including an 1,100-foot-long suspension bridge originally built in 1849. At the time, it was the longest suspension bridge in the world. Its collapse in a windstorm in 1854 and subsequent rebuilding in 1860 provided many lessons for modern bridge engineering. Crossing into Ohio, you'll continue to roll through Pike towns with buildings dating back hundreds of years mixed in with modern homes and businesses. In Norwich, just east of Zanesville, a must-see stop is the National Road Zane Grey Museum. Here you'll find detailed information about the history of the road, as well as dioramas, photos, and artifacts depicting life in earlier days along the route. Additionally, the museum offers information about author Zane Grey's life and career, as well as a comprehensive pottery exhibit covering this major industry of the region. A bit farther west, Zanesville is home to the famous Y Bridge, crossing the Licking and Muskingum rivers near the center of town. Today, the fifth generation of the bridge handles the traffic. As the road rolls on to the west, it passes through the major cities of Columbus, the capital, and Springfield, Ohio, as well as numerous smaller communities offering more in the way of historic structures. Then it's on to Indiana, where you're welcomed by the site of the first toll gate in the state in Richmond's Glen Miller Park, and one of the 12 Madonna of the Trail statues that commemorate the contributions of pioneer mothers in the days of covered wagons. The identical statues were dedicated in 1928 and 29, stretching along the old National Trails Highway from coast to coast, and several are found along the route of the National Road. Across Indiana on the National Road, you'll find more buildings of historic significance, like the Huddleston Farmhouse in Cambridge, which housed travelers along the road in the 1800s, the birthplace and home of poet James Whitcomb Riley in Greenfield, and sites important to women's rights issues. Historic districts in Greenfield, Brazil, Plainfield, Centerville, and other towns are like a step back centuries in time, as are some quiet original sections of the route. The National Road also passes through the large cities of Indianapolis and Terre Haute, which are filled with their own points of interest. Moving on to Illinois, there's more history to enjoy along the road and in towns like Jewett, Casey, Greenup, Marshall, Martinsville, Montrose, Teutopolis, Altamont, and Effingham, as you make your way to Vandalia, the state's original capital and official western terminus of the National Road. Abraham Lincoln is an important part of Illinois history throughout the state, and especially so in Vandalia. Here is where he held his first statewide office in the Illinois House, and various plaques and displays around the old Capitol building tell about some of his and the state's early history. The National Road had been surveyed all the way to St. Louis, Missouri, and that intended path is marked on today's roads. Continuing westward along that original planned route will take you through some more historic towns and countryside in western Illinois, then over the Mississippi River to what had been planned to be the terminus of the road. The National Road has a lot of history to offer up, and even if you don't have time to explore all of it at once, you should try to check out some bits and pieces of it to follow in the footsteps of travelers of earlier centuries, including George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, and to remind yourself of the events and culture that helped build our nation.